All right, folks, let's talk about the UN. The United Nations, that grand institution founded in the aftermath of World War II, with the noble aim of fostering international cooperation and preventing future conflicts, the Big Blue Helmet Brigade. These peacekeepers are often seen in some of the world's most dangerous hotspots, trying to maintain peace and security. The organization that's supposed to be preventing World War III while simultaneously tackling poverty, hunger and climate change. No pressure. They have their hands full with a myriad of global issues. But seriously, is the UN just a well-meaning talking shop, or is it actually making a difference in our messy, complicated world? Are their efforts truly impactful, or just symbolic gestures? Look, the world is a bit of a dumpster fire right now. Everywhere you look, there's chaos and conflict. We've got wars popping off like firecrackers, climate change breathing down our necks, and enough global inequality to make your head spin. The challenges are immense and ever-growing, so it's easy to point a finger at the UN and say, hey, aren't you supposed to be fixing this? Why isn't there more progress? And they'll say, well, we're trying. They're constantly working behind the scenes, negotiating, mediating, and deploying resources. But trying only gets you so far, right? Effort alone isn't always enough to overcome the complex web of global politics and interests, especially when you're dealing with countries that would rather throw a tantrum than play nice. Diplomacy can be a frustrating and slow process. The UN is a bit like that friend who keeps trying to organize a dinner party, but everyone's got dietary restrictions, conflicting schedules, and a tendency to start arguments about politics. It's a tough job keeping everyone on the same page. It's messy, it's complicated, and sometimes you just want to order takeout and call it a night. But despite the challenges, the UN keeps striving, hoping to make the world a better place. The UN wasn't always this beleaguered. It was born out of the ashes of World War II, a time when the world was collectively saying, okay, maybe blowing each other up isn't the best way to solve our problems. So in 1945, they created the UN, this grand experiment in global cooperation. The idea was simple. Get everyone in a room, or a giant general assembly hall, and hash out your differences like civilized nations. No more wars, no more genocide, just peace, love, and understanding. Okay, maybe not that simple, but you get the idea. They even wrote down their goals in a fancy document called the UN Charter. Things like maintaining international peace and security, developing friendly relations among nations, and promoting social progress and better living standards for everyone. It was a beautiful dream, full of hope and optimism, before reality set in. Now, before we get too cynical, let's give credit where credit is due. The UN has actually achieved some pretty remarkable things. For starters, they've prevented a lot of wars. Seriously, remember the Cold War? How we were all one button away from nuclear annihilation. The UN helped keep those tensions in check. And then there's the humanitarian work. The UN is on the front lines of every major crisis, providing food, water, shelter and medical aid to millions of people in need. They're vaccinating kids, fighting diseases, and helping refugees rebuild their lives. They've also made strides in human rights, promoting equality, fighting discrimination, and giving a voice to the voiceless. They're working to protect the environment, promote sustainable development, and make the world a better place for future generations. So yeah, the UN isn't perfect, but they're doing a lot of good in a world that desperately needs it. Section 4, when good intentions go bad, the UN's biggest fumbles. Okay, now for the not so good stuff. Brace yourselves, because let's be honest, the UN has had its fair share of failures and missteps, and by failures I mean colossal face-palm-inducing, how did that even happen moments. Take the Rwandan genocide, for example. Hundreds of thousands of people were slaughtered while the UN stood by, paralyzed by bureaucracy and political infighting. Or the Srebrenica massacre, where UN peacekeepers failed to protect Bosnian Muslims from Serbian forces. And then there's the ongoing conflict in Syria, a humanitarian catastrophe that the UN has been powerless to stop. Millions displaced, countless lives lost, and a solution seems further away than ever before. These are just a few examples of the UN's failures. Failures that have cost lives, shattered communities, and left many wondering if the UN is really capable of fulfilling its mandate. Section 5, Power, Money and Bureaucracy, the Trifecta of Doom. So what's the deal? Why does the UN struggle to address these global crises effectively? Well, it's complicated, isn't it always? The reasons are multifaceted and deeply entrenched in the very structure of the organization. But here are a few key factors that stand out. First, the big players, the ones with the most power and influence, often prioritize their own interests over the collective good. This self-interest can lead to significant roadblocks in decision-making processes. The UN Security Council, the body responsible for maintaining international peace and security, is a prime example of this power dynamic. 5 permanent members, the US, Russia, China, France, and the UK, hold veto power, meaning they can block any resolution they don't like, regardless of the broader consensus. That's right, one country can derail action on critical issues like genocide or war crimes, leading to inaction and frustration. Talk about a recipe for gridlock. This often leaves the UN paralyzed in the face of urgent crises. Second, the UN is chronically underfunded. Despite its global mandate, it struggles to secure the necessary financial resources. It relies heavily on voluntary contributions from member states, which means it's always scrambling for resources, often leading to budget shortfalls. It's like trying to run a global peacekeeping operation on a shoestring budget, making it difficult to respond effectively to crises. And then there's the bureaucracy. The UN's complex structure can be a significant hindrance. The UN is a massive organization with a complex web of agencies, programs and departments, each with its own set of rules and procedures. Decisions can take forever to make, and implementation can be agonizingly slow, often delaying critical actions. It's like trying to turn around a giant cruise ship. The process is slow and cumbersome. It's possible, but it takes time, effort, and a whole lot of maneuvering. The UN's challenges are significant, but understanding them is the first step towards meaningful reform. Section 6, fixing the airplane mid-flight. Can the UN be saved? So, is there any hope for the UN? Can this global institution, which has been a cornerstone of international relations for decades, find a way to reinvent itself? Can this flawed, imperfect organization actually be reformed and made more effective, or is it destined to remain a symbol of unfulfilled promises and bureaucratic inertia? Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The stakes are incredibly high and the answers are far from simple. Some argue that the UN is beyond repair, a relic of a bygone era. They believe it has outlived its usefulness and is no longer fit for purpose in today's complex world. They say it's time to scrap it and start over with something new, something more agile and responsive to current global challenges. Others believe that the UN, for all its flaws, is still the best hope we have for a more peaceful and just world. They see it as an essential platform for dialogue and cooperation. They argue that we need to strengthen the UN, give it more resources, and reform its structures to make it more efficient and accountable. This includes addressing its many shortcomings head-on. They call for reforms to the Security Council, greater transparency and accountability, and a renewed commitment to multilateralism. They believe that with the right changes, the UN can still fulfill its founding promise. It's a tall order, to be sure. Reforming such a vast and complex organization is no easy task, but as the saying goes, never let the perfect be the enemy of the good. With determination and collective effort, perhaps the UN can be saved. Section 7, a vision for the future. Is world peace a pipe dream? Look, the UN is a reflection of us, humanity. It's messy, it's complicated, and it's full of contradictions, but it's also capable of great things when we work together. Imagine a world where the UN is truly empowered to prevent conflicts, protect human rights, and address global challenges like climate change and poverty. Imagine a world where diplomacy and cooperation trump self-interest and aggression. It may seem like a pipe dream, but it's a dream worth striving for, because the alternative, a world without the UN, is a far more frightening prospect. So the next time you hear someone bashing the UN, remind them that it's not some separate entity, some detached bureaucratic machine. It's us, we are the UN, and it's up to us to make it work.